Morning. Supposed to have been done yesterday. Technicalities. So at the end of it, no question, but discussions. This topic and everything, it came out of an accident that happened, and someone lost their spectacles and started to blame the old spectacles were working fine, but this one I got, I couldn't see, couldn't judge proper. And then I was asked questions, and those questions led into this. Sure. And say this is the correct prescription for a person. Where's the baseline? What is the base for that? Can we have a base or find out the standard deviation of the correct prescription? And can we get to the correct prescription, all of us in one patient? So I started right there and then say, maybe we need to find something. So luckily, there's no mathematics, it's only reading, so it will be fine. And if we don't get the same thing, how much that variation could it be? So we'll see how the variation could be and how they differ. And then I asked some medical doctors, especially, that it's possible to take a patient to 10 doctors and come out with 10 diagnoses. So, but this one, this vision of all the senses, the most precious one, hence that legal issue. So what we did, we took this patient, so high myopic astigmatism. There was money somewhere, and this patient would purposefully identify the optometrists who were 5 years or more, say, yeah, the experience will be there, what you do. But we're only interested with subjective refraction. All the other things that they were doing, but all the necessary tests were done because the patient was going to all these optometrists. That I've lost my spectacles. I don't have anything that you can do, a vetometer to check, nothing. They have to start everything afresh. And that's how it came into. So what Alan presented on Monday, that day, astigmatic ametrop, sometimes not easy to present by the dioptric power, makes it easy. The Tybos method, which are similar to the Harris one that we will use here to analyze this data, because it was taking into account all the spheres here in the 80s, while some papers in the past, they were done to try to find the variation of the refractive error, but they were using the nearest equivalence sphere. So here we are trying to take account of everything that's in there. So based on the measurements, these are the means that we got. And then there are the scientific one, the IJ and K, that we use to plot diagrams. And this is our traditional method of it. And based on all the 50 measurements, the patient went to 50 optometrists around the district of Polokwane. And this is how the variation went. So we'll see when we get into the diagram what was varying about. So this is the diagram of all the measurements. So the left eye, was not like the right eye. This is the right eye, which was more myopic. And then this is the left eye. So all this, the mean somewhere around there. And then for the left eye, nearly mostly. So if all these optometrists have obtained the same, there should be only 1 point in the center, 1 point in there. And this is along that line. This is the 0 mark, and then their powers -4 somewhere there, -7 in there. So sometimes this one, Alan showed how you can see the stereo pair of this. But sometimes it's not easy. People like Ray and Larry, they can't do this stereo there. So let us try to do something that's easier for them. So these rates are all the measurements of the 50 optometrists for the right eye. These are for the left eye. And then also here, there's something. So there are some terms. We have got Larry, a barometer, or replicate something. So yeah, so in here is the torsional powers. These are the curvatures. The torsional is what mostly in the operation are showing that when a power go into a surface, not just going straight. Somewhere there's a twisting in there that could be of positive or it could be negative. So it means that power have got all the variation in there. But this is an easier one to see than the stereo pair. This one is showing this variation. Now showing how much these measurements are varying. And hence, for the left eye, smaller, it's just that we did not do uh, the magnified one for this one. But for the right eye, it's showing too much variation. So the variation is also tell you where in which axis along where there's more variation in there. And then because of the too much variation, then did this Mahalanobis distance. This one is to check for outliers. Say invariant. Normally, we know, okay, we'll come to the diagram, but if all measurements are below this line, they are fine. But by mere looking, we realize this optometrist and this were too high from the other one for the right eye, and this is for the left eye. And then we remove these 3 outliers. Then after removing, then the arrangement looks like this. Now, after removing only those 3, 2 for the right and 1 for the left, then we're left with that one. So then this much, they are nearly there, but some variation is still there. And then this, we're checking the skewness and the kurtosis. How much is this going up or skewing in one side to another? But if they were within this line, it means there's no kurtosis. If it's this line, there's no skewness. But because of that right eye there, it's showing so much of the kurtosis. But this one now is slightly better, but not the smaller one as for the capital part, while there's one for the torsional. I'm sorry, for the capital and the torsional one. Then this is when before we remove the outliers, but after removing, now the diagram, the scatter, looks slightly different from the other ones. You see, this looks up here, although for the right eye, there's still too much there. Then now we come and try to do the statistics now we're after removing the outliers. But something, if you look, these powers, they slightly go out after the removal of outliers, so that something was there and the variation now become less. While there are some small numbers in there, it means there's variation, but can be seen is so much on the spherical than on the astigmatism. And the volume there, it was 80, now to remove only to 3, where this one was so small in there. Then this is the star-based plot now, where we went to the mean from here, based on this one. And then we connect each measurement of all those variation of the measurement that are far away from each other now. And then the mean is still connecting the mean to each measurements of them. And then it gave us this star best. And then from the star best, that's where we calculated the Euclidean differences of each measurement. So now there we have it with the outliers in all. But after the removal of outliers, you see now the means are slightly now more lesser than but, and 90 degrees become less. So we saw that after the removal of outliers, now the reproducibility then was much better then. And then we could see, based on these results, and it means we see that we optometrists, we can differ by this spherical, for the sphere component, we can differ by, but the cylinders, we could differ by 0.45. And after the removal of outliers, then it improved the reproducibility of this thing. So this maybe still need to be done more because the patient was moderately myopic. So -7, -0.5 seal, and the left eye was better. Then we realized that out of there's so much variation, but because the patient was not an optometrist, just someone there. Had it been an optometrist, would have asked more questions, what else we done. But our thinking based on these diagrams, it's showing that so much of the variation is vertical. And once it's vertical, it means that, okay, we who are teaching, we are not teaching far enough that people, whether they were not balancing, actually something that they have to do with the testing in the clinic in there, or could it be that we did not use a cytoplasmic refraction in here? Could be something, but if they balance to do something, maybe this variation, because originally here it was varying by 1.25 diopter. So it means we optometrists, we can differ by 1 diopter. From this sense, maybe a more, the factors say that could be consulting room, some are longer, some smaller, the illumination in there because they are not the same, could be, but the other thing, accommodation in there and not balancing or anything, or maybe more investigation could be needed where we take a more higher myopic and metropic and someone who is hyperopic and this study. So, Prof. Rick, Prof. Larry, we can discuss. So I thank you. Oh, okay.
Solani, you may have already told us, but I didn't quite understand. When you did your analysis of kurtosis and skewness, were you looking at each term individually, the skewness of the distribution of M and the distribution of J0 and J45? Were they done separately or combined in some way?
They were done on an individual one. Oh, I wanted to go back to it. Yeah, yeah. So the program, the software was going on individually. Yeah.
That's an interesting analysis to do.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. This is very relevant to me because just last weekend, I actually had a patient coming in, bringing their glasses, told me I just got this a week ago and I can't see with my glasses. So bought 2 pairs. Single vision, and a multifocal. So when I vetted, the single vision and the multifocal is like the same script. So I'm like, what's happening? I'm like, okay, just allow me to do a thorough eye test. Let me just do a comprehensive eye test. And when I did that, I actually found a variation of 1.50 diopter difference. And the patient's like, I think I like yours. It's actually very nice. So it made me to start to think, like, how do we standardize this as optometrists? So this is like very awesome because I actually encountered this just last weekend. Thank you so much.
I just wonder, who's the person that went through all these refractionings? Who's crazy enough to do that?
Yeah.
Now, this patient, when I met her, she had 4 spectacles, and all of them were not comfortable. And then I examined at the university, and I said, no, maybe something's not working well, but there's money somewhere. The Medical Research Council, which I was about to forfeit, said, no, let us do something. You go and consult. And she agreed because she, I'm having all these 4, but they are not, but she agreed. She was happy because the final prescription that she's using now is the one that was obtained by the residents optometrists at the university. Because I got mine and then they started to do until we get to the correct one.
And a follow-up question, was the autorefractor, the phoropter that was used, was it the same? The environment all the same?
No, that's why I say consultation, because we're not going with it. We're showing you go there.
Thank you, Lawrence. This can be a very useful student, and also in assisting our students with that. So, just how old was the patient? Because I mean, age, variation, hyperopia. I just missed it. Sorry. What was the 27?
Yes.
Okay. So if you do this in younger children, hyperopes, you can get quite different results. It would be interesting to see. Thank you.
Oh, Atchison is ready there.
I still have one more question. That's not ready yet. Looking at the stereo plot that you showed us, it was clear that the ellipsoid of this distribution was longer vertically. That's in the direction of M on the spherical power. How much longer? Is it maybe 2 times longer than the width, or what was the, how much extra variability do you have in M compared to the J0 or J45 term?
It varied by 1.25. Yeah, and then compared to the 0.7, yeah, for the J0 and J45, yeah.
Thank you, Solani.
All right, as everybody can see, next up is David Atchison, all the way from Australia. And he is going to be talking to us about non-orthogonal spectacle lenses to correct keratoconus. David, it's all up to you. You can share your screen and get started. It's showing. You might want to put it onto presentation.
Yeah, I would, but oh, hang on. I want to move that down. Is that working now?
Yes, we are seeing both slides.
You're lucky. Well, what do you suggest? What do you suggest I do?
Are you looking at 2 screens?
Yeah, I am.
Then maybe share the other screen.
I'm not sure which one I should be sharing. What I think that one's going there. Let's see what happens.
That's the same. Oh, apparently you can go to display settings at the top.
I've done it's not helpful.
Okay, so you need to choose display settings and then duplicates.
I'm sorry, what was that first thing I had to do?
Display settings, choose duplicate.
Yeah.
Duplicate.
Yeah, it's just it's not saying anything.
Okay. Okay, I think unshare, and then when you choose the screen to share, you need to choose the big screen. The one that's got the entire slide.
Hello, anyone there?
Yeah, yeah, we can.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything now.
Yeah, I'm seeing a squiggle.
Can't see anything now.
Yeah, see if there's anything there. We'll go with that. Go with it.
Slides, so I think you will be able to see them all right.
If you
Okay. For regular signature.
Excuse me, David. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, if you unplug the other screen, this one should become dominant. Then it should be full screen.
just minimize this one, minimize this one.
Oh, we'll go for this then.
Okay. I think this was, I was just about to say that there is actually a sort of a drive, but it's actually installed there here.
Minimize this one. This one goes
It's
to
put together relatively quickly, and this would need some, some organisation after the fair. But when you see the latest stuff, you realise there has to be somebody else because I'm just not part of this kind of stuff. By a group help us all, and they describe the use of non-orthogonal controlling in refraction patients with keratoconus. And even in trilemmas, you have differences between crystal regions that are less and greater than 90 degrees. The potential values of 90 degrees. And they found that they need to make a smaller angle, have values between 65 to 85 degrees. Now, using some modifications to their refraction technique, they were able to optimize the non-orthogonal form, and they were able to make some improvement in the children. And also, some of the people that they were testing appreciated this. The majority of differences that they got were actually not far away from 90 degrees, so about 80 and 85 degrees in the majority of cases. And you just see on the diagram, it's got the orthogonal visual acuity logma on the horizontal scale, and on the vertical scale, you've got the sorry. You've got non-orthogonal vertically. If you better with the non-orthogonal lens, it looks like we'll get less than one, but you can see. Now, earlier on, the group had indicated that the optics of keratoconus eyes might not be fully captured by selective melanoma. And suggests that the so-called irregular astigmatism may not be just fully systematic higher order aberration. And they did indicate at the time that they when they lenses actually wouldn't be really appropriate beyond a simple area of the limit. And that makes sense because we know how much but 20 states are in California. And this was done design work in a previous paper, particularly beyond precision and the power of various readings. And we don't really understand how they apply it to surgical lenses that they've developed in the clinical trial. Now, how you can perceive that blending. So, this is a tangential or radial power. So this is the power out from the center of the lens. And we can hear that something like this. So F for power, you can have F and then beta times theta. And another way of putting that is to put it two fractals. Probably actually can't cross because they necessarily writing will be balanced. S times theta, and the other side would be plano at an angle of theta plus theta. And here we're bringing half theta and theta plus theta. And if you had an orthogonal and the conventional length, theta would be 90 degrees. Now, when we're looking at how this would form, you could form six regions, which side would be needed to describe the power that changes really within a 0 to 350 degree range. And well, I suppose it's a bit useful here having the other slide because you can see what's coming out. So just the equation diagram, this is about the environmental ability. And you see it's got these regions. Now, regions 1, 3, and 5. If you look at the equation there, you see that there's a beta on the denominator. So it's less than 90 degrees. That would indicate that curve is sinusoidal curve is compressing. And then when you go to the region 2, 4, and 6, see the reflection 90 degrees, then you have an expansion. So on the diagram here, so the conventional lens, if they were the greens were 90 degrees apart and given by that black curve, then you've got reference every 180 degrees. This one that show the compression and the expansion. Now we also repeat every 180 degrees. So you see that this is a region out here over this side it's expanding and then it's compressing here. And that's the real. So anyway, that was rather intriguing. I think the first I thought they just got it wrong and they were just dealing with the bleaching cross cylinders and you can just work that at conventional form. Then I realized I wanted something. So I set it out as a task to do to develop non-orthogonal lens surfaces that can be used for designing and improved ophthalmic lenses in conditions such as keratoconus. Now, this is where my colleague came into his own, and what he did was he developed a non-orthogonal surface as a used to define surface in the program VNAP, which we will be familiar. And he refers to this as a bicubic meridian approach. So essentially, we're trying to map what we've got on an angle meridian theta G to meridian theta red to another meridian theta red. And there's really a lot more detail there that I just left out. A little bit more on, and this is going to one meridian then put onto the other. So on the bottom, we've got our meridian theta n, and then it's going to be mapped on to theta n. And this is sort of the process here. So if we it was an orthogonal lens, we just get but we end up with curve here. So we had the third order polynomial strip, and we just made sure that they clean up nicely, but when the tangents are continuous there. And that's sort of the limit of the technicality of doing. And for a confirmation that if you're going to do a user-defined surface in VNet, you've got to define some derivative. So the derivative was the and d by dr. Just the state of the surface. Theta we built with the earliest derivative. Y is just pushing down from the y or it could be the direction. Now it's just the distance out from. All right, so you really go to linear to the equation for these are quite complicated. So I haven't. Okay, let's look at some results. Now, this these figures here show you tangential and sagittal power of pupil power lens. So we're looking at the power across the pupil. The lens itself, without mentioning, has got a diameter of 20 millimeters. So when I say -1 or 1 on scale, 5 doctors here with a 2-doctor cylinder, and if you've got an orthogonal lens, it's actually 180. We've got a lens that is a real lens, and it's got zero thickness, so it's completely real. And we then if you look at the map here, the tangential power, that's total power, means that's the sort of thing you measure with the two lenses if it's rotated around. So 5 volts is along 180 degrees, and then it's up to 7 volts along 90 degrees. If you look at the sensible power, which is the power circumferentially, then there is 5 along 90 to 7 along 180. And I must say, until I've gone and done that, I didn't realise that it would completely happen like that. That what you got to do just 90 degrees relative to 10 inch result. Now let's look at the same lens, except that now there will be in an non-orthogonal form, and we're going to set the principle, we're going to set the distance between the meridians as 60, or if you like, 120 degrees. So this is the lens that we're showing here. So 5 doctors here with the 2-doctor cylinder, bracket 60 degrees times 180. And this is what you get now. Now, the tangential powers are what we would expect. So we've got a power of 5 along 180, and that goes up to 7 along 120. And 120, sorry. Okay, I'm back to where I should be. So we've got the power turning from 5 to 70, meridian to 60 degrees apart. But if you look at the terminal meridian powers, they're really quite strange. So the powers now varying at a greater range, and we've got 4.5 volts along 120. Oh, I'm sorry. It's very, and I'm very nervous. Okay, we've got powers. We've got power for the sensible one varying from 2.5 degrees along 120, 9.5 dots along 180. And you see you get these very sharp power changes at 120 and 80. I see how sort of mentioned that this is actually a Remax representation. And if you have on the with ordinary representation, you have to complement the angles. Where I've got 120 become through. Anyway, let me move to side. On the graph, just show you what happens if you just follow up on that stage business. So I'm a little bit concerned about the digital power because it looks so strange to me. So what I did was I was able to get all my height and I created what's called a grid stack surface in VMAX. So this is just a whole bunch of height on the surface, just spread out an XY grid. And when I did the growth tracing within surfaces, so with the user defined the goal, and I got almost exactly the same result. So that sort of is on the right side. Anyway, to what we allow tracing with problem lenses, and even when the non-orthogonality means that the principal meridians aren't perpendicular to each other. What we would want to do now is to determine whether it needs to improve retinal image quality, at least in a theoretical sense, for people who don't have regular images, such as would occur in keratoconus. Now, in this procedure, and we're just starting this now, then what we would do is to get one principal meridian and we'll set it to 180 degrees. And then in optimization, we would allow the radii curvature of the two principal meridians to vary. We would allow there to be rotation surface of optical axis, and then we would allow the principal meridian to rotate relative to the first meridian. Okay, that's it, I'm done. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the mishap.
you so much, David, and we could see perfectly well. Any questions from the room? Larry's first.
Hi, David. Larry Tyvus here. Good to see you. Welcome to Africa. Sorry you couldn't join us. I have lots of questions for you, but I'll just ask one. As far as I can tell from your presentation, these polar maps are smooth and continuous. Is that right? There's no discontinuities. And if that's correct, well, let me just finish my question. Assuming I'm right in thinking they're smooth, then it should be possible, I think, in principle, to integrate those power maps to get back to ray aberration maps, and then from there integrate a second time to get to the wavefront error. And I'd be really curious to know what that wavefront error map looks like, because if you differentiate it twice, you're back to power, and to confirm that we did it correctly. And earlier in this meeting, I was bragging that any smooth surface can be represented by Zernike polynomials. So I'm wondering if the wavefront error function for this interesting lens you have can be represented, its wavefront error function, can it be represented by Zernike polynomials?
In the ZMX program, in the ZMX program, we can of course work out the wavefront errors. So we can certainly look at that. I think make it a bit more of a comment because you know a lot more about this sort of area than I do. My colleagues can help me if I took the footing.
Any further questions? No? No. No further questions, and thank you so much, David. Appreciate that.
This is the rest of the meeting. Bye.
Hi.
I just sent you the link to the video first. It expires on the 1st of September, so download it.
Oh, I downloaded mine. Yeah, the email one. Yeah, I got it downloaded.
Oh, you got it as well?
I didn't actually because the speed was so low I couldn't type.
Yeah, I had to do
Oh.
a few
Oh, but
tries.
we all had separate ones, right?
We have separate
Ah,
ones.
okay. Then it made no sense that I sent it to you. Yes. If you want a video of us, then you have it.
It was Abyssinia. It was okay.
I don't know what the teacher. I
It
just
was
downloaded it like 2
music
minutes
was
ago.
like really nice. It's not that you can do whatever you dreamt of. Yeah, the background music was nice. It has all the like the videos. Hear the background music when you guys have time. Yeah.
Goeiemôre, good morning, Dumela, Sawubona, Umolo, Jen Dobe, huh? Guten Tag. So when we were talking, only 4 of our delegates here have a home language of English, and yet we are able to converse quite comfortably in English where it's not even our first language. I didn't even attempt Persian or your language, so I was just too skeptical, but we are able to discuss highfalutin topics and conceptualize quite a lot, even though it's not our first language. And because communication is so important, because we are fortunate to be exposed to a common language. So I'm going to talk, my talk today is talking about silent sight, the unheard burden. Those of you who had informal conversations with me know that I said you can only know you in Africa once you've seen a giraffe. And it's important to know that these majestic animals are adapted to work properly in Africa. I'm still fascinated by the biomechanics, their long legs and their long necks and their 20-inch tongue, 75 or 45 centimeter tongue, which got a special UV protection on so that they can consume up to 45 kilograms of vegetation. That's about 100 pounds vegetation that they have to consume a day. But what if you're a giraffe without spots? What if you do not fit in with the general communication frameworks that we expect? My other passion besides giraffes is the beautiful people in our country, the very diverse population. And this project is specifically aimed at the very marginalized community, the deaf community, from their silent side. So I'm going to just give some background on what we are doing with this project. You don't have diplopia. There's 2 speakers on the screen. That funny looking lady there is me trying to look professional. The colleague over there is Dr. Anche Gqeberha, who's from the University of Johannesburg. The students know her as their ocular anatomy and human anatomy lecture. So I want to she was unfortunately not able to join us, but she conceptualized this whole project. She was the lady who started with some involvement in the what we call E-Deaf Society, where it is an adult learning center for the deaf community. So with her involvement there, she said, don't worry, I've got links with the UJ optometry department. We will go and test the eyes. Of course, that's how I got involved. And we said, that's what I do. I do community engagement projects. We'll take a bunch of students. We will go and test the deaf community's eyes. Then we can bring them to the clinic, or we can go there and we can have a look and see what's going on. Little did we know that most of the deaf patients in South Africa are illiterate. Our solution was to have little boards with the instruction written on to say, look at distance, look at near, but most of our communities are illiterate. So we had to backtrack and start thinking differently about how we're going to approach this. So we launched a pilot project. So just a session overview, what we're going to talk about. In here, there's not optics. When I spoke to my husband last night and I said it's like talking about the color of bubblegum in front of a mathematical convention, he said, well, sometimes they need to chew some bubblegum to get to the end point and the research. So this is not optics. And in retrospect, I should have presented all the dioptric powers in dioptric power sphere to make it more optics involved. But maybe we just start thinking out of a different viewpoint once I showed you the stats. So we started this project. And we've launched a pilot project so going back to why we then decided to do this project is, if you look at the deaf population across the world, globally there's about 466 million people living with hearing disability. If you look at that little pie chart over there, more than or almost 80% are situated in low and middle income countries, where they do not have adequate care. We know how important vision is for the deaf patient. If you're not able to see, there is even further barriers with regards to access to language, restricted learning opportunities, and then there is the social limited healthcare accessibility for socioeconomical problems. But if you look at that, there's compounding problems in the deaf community. We know about syndromic syndromes such as Waardenburg. You remember from your PEDS studies, Waardenburg, Alport's, Usher syndrome, where it's actually a compounding effect, and the disability with vision and hearing loss is often combined, like congenital rubella syndrome, where we see there's a lot of combinations or dual, almost a double whammy. So when we went and do the study, it was working so well. When we were doing the study, we actually set up a pilot study in a low-income urban area in a district called Lenasia in the Gauteng province, we went to the school and we actually said it is a school for special needs children with special hearing disabilities, with hearing disabilities or deaf, or with deaf. And we said everybody who wants to participate are welcome, and we will include you in the study if you sign the consent and the assent form. So the typical population was between 7 and 18, and of the school, I think of 200 children, we were able to examine 55 of those children. Astoundingly, we found that of these children, oh, that's before we get to the results. So we took a group of 30 students. I don't know if any of you was involved in that. We had some deaf sensitization workshops and some workshops with basic sign language to include in their training. It was 3 sessions of 2 hours long. We went to the school and we assessed these children. We're under the supervision of the supervisors. We had fixed choice case history answers to include a little bit more standardization and make it easier to conceptualize for the students as well as the deaf learners. 83% of these participants never had an eye test before. This is consistent with findings in South Africa, where if we look at children who enroll in school, up to about 75% haven't had previous eye examinations. But you would think that children in a deaf school with a specific disability, where vision is such an important tool, that they would have at least had the opportunity to have an eye assessment. So that just highlights the substantial gap in basic eye care services for this marginalized population. During the case history, on the forced choices that they had to choose, was some of the only, I think it was 3.2% declared no symptoms. Up to 75% of them did discuss or did mention that there was reduced visual acuity. And that is in line with the findings that we found when we were doing the assessments. There was reduced visual acuity found in quite a number of the students. If we do this, we've measured the visual acuity with Lea symbol charts, because most of them it is the communication. But if you can see, more than 56% have mild impairment. If we've measured it in 6.6, so Lockmore equivalent, I think it was 6.18 to 6.24, 20, I think 20, I can't remember, up to 2200 had visual acuity according to the World Health Organization of mild impairment. Another interesting fact that we found is that almost 20% had intraocular differences of more than 0.2 Lockmore, which means that there is the possibility of amblyopia coming up later. We have done quite a lot of, I'm presenting just the visual acuity results here. We have measured, we've done subjective refraction and objective refraction. We've measured visual acuity, amplitude of illumination, we've measured convergence. So if you invite me to the next conference, I will be able to present all those results there. But this shows that there is a disproportionate burden of uncorrected visual impairment in this deaf community. We need to start looking at that. We need to advocate for more policies. We need to secure funding to assist these patients, because a lens can change an eye. A pair of spectacles can change a life. But for a deaf child, clear vision is not a luxury. It's the key to language, learning, and life. Thank you. Any questions? No questions? Oh, there's a question. Thank you, Vivi.
Thank you for the nice presentation. So I would like to know if when you guys were studying the children in the school of the blind and the deaf, did you come across like misdiagnosed patients that were actually placed there?
Meaning that they were not deaf?
Yes.
that was difficult. We haven't looked into that. We were more concerned about the vision. Most of them, and I've got all the statistics because that's part of another presentation, how many were completely deaf, how many were hard of hearing, how many were able to use the interpreter, and how many were using sign language. Just interesting, before you disconnect, Tanya, I just want to quickly show something very interesting, which I think the audience will enjoy. If we look at this slide over there, if I do this, a very interesting thing that I've learned while we were there. If you look at this bottom photo, you'll recognize the djembe drums that were playing. While we were there, the students most of them are deaf, so they make sometimes very awkward and uncomfortable sounds, which they don't hear. So in all the classrooms, and specifically in the one classroom, there were children playing some of the djembe drums to the vibration actually makes them a little bit more peaceful, and it blocks out the uncomfortable, awkward sounds made by the children. So that was quite an interesting thing to note. Good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ansunel. Okay, so this morning we've been looking at a number of the South African challenges. We saw inconsistent refractive testing. We've heard about children with hearing loss. And Anche Oosthuizen is going to talk to us about the barriers to the accessibility of eye and vision care services in Gqeberha, Eastern Cape, South Africa.
Gqeberha.
Right.
So, okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Anche Oosthuizen, like you heard. I am an optometrist and in my final year master's student at the University of Johannesburg. Most of my history in optometry has been in the public sector of South Africa, in the Eastern Cape specifically, which means I had the experience of these shortcomings we're going to discuss today firsthand. And that makes this discussion very important to me, and I'm grateful to get to share it with you today. I'd also like to just preface this discussion, and I think Ansunel did a great job at that already, to say that the past week we've discussed optics at length and in incredible ways. And under the umbrella of optometry, the goal of these optics is to allow a patient to see better. And so I think the fault lies not in science, but in delivery. And that is where this study was inspired. So I'm going to talk to us today about the barriers of accessibility under these three headings, particularly in South Africa. The first is the planned or intended pathway of eye care accessibility in the country, followed by the present reality of eye care access, and lastly, what the future of access is going to look like. Just to give you some background, the new democratic government of '94 restructured the healthcare system in South Africa, and the constitution states that that all South Africans should have equal access to eye care. Unfortunately, this is not the case, and there are many constraints to the system. Most of them are because of inadequate human resources, poor stewardship and leadership, and restricted funding in the public sector. The healthcare sector in South Africa is also very polar, very divided, where 84% of the population is dependent on the public sector for healthcare access. Only 16% of the population depend on or are able to afford private healthcare access by means of medical aids. 50% of our country's healthcare spending is spent on 16% of the population. The poor, therefore, have disproportionate access barriers. Hence, access is determined by socioeconomic status. The structure of public health care in South Africa consists of the following hierarchy. It starts at the PHC, the primary healthcare level, where patients enter the public healthcare system. The PHC system is largely manned by nurses in community-based clinics, where if further treatments necessary, patients are referred to regional hospitals, and ophthalmology is situated at tertiary or specialized hospitals. This is the area, the PHC is the area where primary eye care should be located. But then we look at the present reality. Optometrists are called the custodians of primary eye care, and yet 90% of these optometrists are employed in the, more than 90% in the private sector of South Africa. In the year 2000, when the World Health Organization started their campaign for Vision 2020, they had certain targets for bridging that gap of access to eye care. They said that there should be one ophthalmologist for every 250,000 people, one ophthalmic trained nurse for every 100,000 people, and one refractionist or optometrist in South Africa for every 50,000 people. In the private sector, this looks beautiful. There's one optometrist for every 14,500 people. This is almost on par with developed countries. However, of the 4,318 optometrists employed in our country, only 226 of them work in the public sector, which changes that ratio to one optometrist for every 224,000 people. The World Health Organization, as we heard the other day as well, has now, or in 2021, initiated the SPECS 2030 initiative, which is trying to, or intended to, address this uncorrected refractive error and reduce that burden by 40% in developing countries. The last part of their initiative is surveillance, which is where this study also can hopefully contribute to literature. As we have all heard, optometrists are very important in addressing the barrier of, or the burden of uncorrected refractive errors in our country. Okay, so that's when this study was, or that was the inspiration for this study. It was a cross-sectional survey design study based on the accessibility framework developed by Theda et al. In 2007. I'm sure if anyone has looked into healthcare accessibility, you would have noticed there are a lot of frameworks developed by a lot of sociologists and researchers. The reason this one specifically was chosen because of its application to eye care in the form of affordability, acceptability, and availability of eye care services. So the framework was applied to the Eastern Cape, Gqeberha, formerly called Port Elizabeth, and all the patients who were visiting the Port Elizabeth Eye Clinic during the month of October 2023 were invited to complete a questionnaire on their investigating the barriers they faced when accessing eye care. This is the hospital here. That's a picture from a waiting room. 390 people participated in the study, of whom more than 60% were females in the African group and were older than 40 years. Between 40 and 59 was most prevalent. Most of them spoke Xhosa at home, which also correlates to their population groups, and most of them earned less than 7,000 rand per month. The accessibility dimension of affordability that Theda described consists of direct costs and indirect costs. Direct being the cost of a consultation or the cost of buying spectacles. Indirect cost was things like missing a day of work because of having to go to the eye clinic, and finding or paying for transport to get to the eye clinic. So this dimension describes the financial access a patient has to eye care. The most prevalent or the largest barrier that participants faced when accessing eye care was the cost of an eye exam by a private practice optometrist. Like we said, there aren't many public sectors. For the years 2022 to 2024, there was only one optometrist in the whole province in the public sector. So many patients were forced to visit a private practice optometrist, which is unaffordable to nearly 90% of them. The cost of new spectacles was also very high, and the cost of medication and transport. The second dimension of access that was investigated was the acceptability barriers, which describes the interaction of an individual with a healthcare system or their attitude towards this system. Patients were given statements and asked to report how agreeable these statements are to their experiences of the barriers. The most agreeable statement was that it was important to patients to be treated with respect when visiting an eye care professional. It's also important to patients to know or understand what is wrong with their eyes and why they need help. They also felt it very important to be able to trust the system to address their problem. And lastly, most of them felt that they only needed to see an optometrist when something was wrong, meaning symptomatic presentations. The last barrier we looked at was the availability barriers, which describes the ability of a healthcare service to be available at the right time and place when it's needed. And the largest one was the lack of services close to their home, meaning a lot of patients had to travel to access eye care services. And this was followed by not knowing where to go when they have an eye problem, who to present to, and then the long waiting time or appointment changes without prior knowledge was a big barrier. There were other interesting findings of the study, which we don't unfortunately have time for today, but one of the most important ones, I would say, is that the majority of participants were referred to the eye clinic by their PHC nurse. And the majority of participants would say that if they had a problem, the first place they would go was to their primary healthcare clinic. So this makes PHC or primary healthcare clinics very important as a vehicle for eye care delivery in the public sector. You can see only about 2.6% of participants were referred to the eye clinic by an optometrist in the private sector. Again, because people could not afford to see a private sector optom. All right, so to conclude, what does the future of healthcare look like in South Africa? In 2015, the government initiated the National Health Insurance White Paper, which will be implemented in phases, but in the words of the president, aims to use the strengths of and capabilities of both public and private health sectors to build a single quality health system for all. We all know in South Africa there are various challenges that still need overcoming and addressing, but the hope is that research such as this would be able to inform policy making and provide advocacy for patients in their pursuit of eye care. All right, I would like to just conclude with this statement from Ramsden et al. That said, if access to healthcare is considered a central human right, then safeguarding people's healthcare should be viewed as a moral obligation. The last thing before I close, I want to show you a video as well of a patient. It's an interesting little clip of optics in action, I guess we could call it. This was an 84-year-old gentleman who had aphakia for about 20 years and had never worn specs in his life before. And this was the first time he picked up his glasses. And I'd like to just remind us all that that is, as an optometrist, this is our aim point in studying these optics. I just want to mute it because otherwise you will hear my shrieking in the background. He is 84 years old. He also said he wanted to show me that he can still dance at 84.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Many questions. Sorry, we don't have
On the barriers, okay, thanks for that. Yeah, that's what we do. But on the barriers, I see this part that it's like so much blamed on certain group, but you are not bringing this politician who are the willings in there, because I know in Limpopo, every hospital had 4. While the waking of the 4, 2 resigned and went to do medicine. Optometry is seen as the last. Yeah, and nurses are rated and from this there, and I see that on yours, it's nothing like the ophthalmologist at Mankweng Hospital, Keisha, just resigned because of the clinic of the province. I see that such type of barriers of these fighters are not in there.
I think that would take many pages of publication to describe all of the role players in poor accessibility. But it is true, optometry is not a very sought after public health sector career, which is very sad. And hopefully, again, that is the purpose of research, is to try and inform the policymakers of barrier or problems like this, to hopefully make it more appealing to these guys, you know, to come to the public sector. Any other questions?
Just a comment, really. To me, it's kind of the carrot and the stick problem. How do you get optometrists or other eye care or other healthcare professionals to get out of the private sector and into the public sector and contribute? And I'm sort of reminded of the situation that existed in Australia after the Second World War, when there was very little healthcare available in remote rural districts. And part of the problem was solved by the licensing boards that were granting the right to practice. And they instituted rules that said if you want to be a practicing medical professional, you had to spend some time in the rural districts. It was a mandatory requirement. So I wonder if there is possibly a role for the professional licensing board of optometrists to take it upon themselves to generate some rules that say, if you want to be a practicing optometrist in this country, you have to contribute, you know, to solve this moral problem that's serving the underserved public. And it's the stick approach, not the carrot. Don't try to draw them in by giving them a big salary or something. It's kind of force them. It's a thought. I don't know if it could possibly work, but it's maybe worth thinking about.
Yeah, that's a very good point. In South Africa, in the medical field, if you do want to qualify, you have to spend a year. We call it a Zuma year. You have to spend in public sector. And this is applicable to all healthcare fields except optometry, which, yeah, I don't fully understand why. I suspect it has to do with infrastructure. There isn't a space for optometrists at a lot of clinics, but that would certainly address the problem. So we are looking into speaking to the right people to try and get that initiated as well. I'm sure maybe Ansunel and they might have some more advice on that.
I'll answer brief to a very difficult question because I'm on the professional board, so responsible for licensing, and it's been an extremely difficult struggling. The reason behind why there's no optometrist was an infrastructure issue, where now there's no funding to pay those optometrists to open positions. Provinces such as the Limpopo province have been definite gateway, but in the other provinces, it's difficult. It's really difficult. So, although the professional board is responsible for licensing, is dependent on the Minister of Health to provide the funding, but we are busy with serious negotiations, but it feels like swimming in syrup. It's difficult, but we are trying because that would force optometrists and get optometrists like Anche, who then develops a love for the public sector, to be involved in that. But that is the aim of the professional board, to get optometrists into the public sector. To get a stick approach, but we're looking at other alternatives as well. Thanks.
Oh, sorry.
So you mentioned corruption as part of the problem, and I'm wondering if there's an attitude in government to start really penalizing those people that are corrupt, because I often see anywhere where the people that are guiding resources wrongly are rarely punished. They just go to a new job, and I just, you know, it takes people being upset that the money is not being spent as desired. And is there a will for that in the country?
I certainly haven't enough for that. But yeah, I think again, I think these guys who are in the institutions that drive these fields might be able to give you a better answer. But
No, very difficult, and very difficult. Very, because you see the word comrade. We're comrades in. Yeah, it's difficult, that one.
thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, Anke, and thank you. And next up we have Matt. He's coming to. Where are you? Where are you?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, hello. I'm in Poland currently, in my family home, and it is wonderful to be here with you. I've been watching this on YouTube. A huge thank you to Tanya and also to John for making streaming and connecting possible, especially John on the tiny camera. I can see and our Polish friends and everybody there. So it's almost as if I was there. So it's wonderful and great to be here with you.
Thanks, Matt.
So, shall I?
It's over to you.
Okay, perfect, wonderful. I'm going to share my screen right here, and I'm going to move the presentation over to the screen. Okay. Can you see the presentation? Excellent. So, I present the university, and what I'm going to see about today, mostly one of our students, John Richard. So, very big thank you to him for reading this work. And today the world is full of new and interesting optical designs for spectacle lenses and contact lenses, both for myopia control and also for remedying the effect of presbyopia. And here on the screen, we can see examples of spectacle lenses, which include very interesting segments. So here in gray, in all lens design, you can see that segments such as lens wedge or segments such as annuli were included by the manufacturer to achieve certain optical effects. However, probably implement contact lenses. So likewise, as it was the case with the spectacle lens with pigment, in contact lenses, we see different angular and circular pigments which have different optical power. For example, a three-frame zone can have an extra positive power, meaning focus on the red and the contrast modulation on the red. In particular, we can see here we have lens designs, mic and myopia control lens on the bottom, and mobility in the top row. And as we see, they are similar in different ways. They both have angular films, and another way. And the design and why export there is something has a very small localized hole. If you would like to understand what do these nodes do, what is an optical effect, and we try to answer this question, focusing along in four questions. And the questions are: is there multifocal or maybe dual focus optical system like that? Is it a proportion of the focus light, or maybe the magnitude of the defocus that more meaningful optical effect? These lenses will typically have a clear zone, can be in the center or in the surround, that is designed for normal viewing, and then they will have an extra plus or minus fewer rooms that we can zone. So isn't it proportion of the area we zone, or maybe it's the magnitude, how much the focus, how much optical effect we put into the one. And then number two, if keep portion focus versus is of content, is it to zone in the center or maybe in the surround would give better inequality. And if we know this, and still we hold it proportion constant, how many zones is better? Is it better to have one big treatment or better many? What is it? And finally, in statistical lenses, we can have shown that toward the optical axis, focus different distances, the focus level, but also sometimes where red bundles are designed to intersect away from the optical axis. So, is it better? How does it work? So, in order to answer the question, methodology. So, we can design any of such complicated lenses in Word in the computer, and we start at the top left with a simple specification. And the specification says, let's say 0, it's 0 millimeters from the center. This center, like that, let's say 0 diopters. So this is the distance. And then we go further out, maybe at 1.61 millimeters from the center. Let's go 2 diopters. So on board, we build, going from the center, we build our lens, whatever we like. We can have transition zone, which can be smooth or sharp, anything we like. And when we have our meridian lens design, what do we do that lens? So spin around. Because we with the alternative. So we look at the power map. And very interesting that you also part of the optical version. And then we said convert this version into wavelength error. And one of the wavelength error is a wonderful description of what is happening with in pupil to get all sorts of useful things. Because first function that can be based on really method principles, and geometrical principles. Because we know where every ray goes, so this can also obtain rate expenses for background for every single point on the journey from the people playing to the and from our we can also get stimulations of the occupied or even the whole scenes, which quantify in terms of modulation transfer function and so that's the first question. I'm realizing that I'm probably a little bit behind. I'll try to keep it simple and interesting, hopefully. And brief. Let's take this first question. Is it proportion or the magnitude? The focal versus which is most important. So we can do the length. We go from top to bottom, and to minimize it includes three of the so this topic. The quality if we don't get up. Then put a ring in the ground. And this is 85% of the whole object. And then we thicker, 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 until eventually we're over with extra power. And then extra power without the focus, we don't see anything there. And then quantify the so we design the we're looking at the element for the increasing amount of detail, so very low detail, one millimeter on the left of the expected to very high amount of detail. This 2020 vision. What is contrast? How much contrast do we have in an optic? And if we look at the solid line, uh, we can see that as we change proportion, more and more proportion of the treat or focus conflict, we can see that the contrast drops and drops and drops and drops in a very meaningful and controlled way. So clearly the proportion has a very, very profound effect. How do you make it? So on I have decided to look at my lens with now change the amount of the focus that we put in anime. And we change the amount of the focus that we put from blind half all the way to 20 diopters. And notice that on average, the proportion that is not changed in the so on average, the proportion is governed by how much will the contrast drop one lens. And the magnitude of the focus that we include only controls the descent. So very low amount of extra power in the treatment of the light will create a smooth descent. Drop maybe a 10 degree, it drops to the stubborn level. And if we include a huge amount of diopters, just sharply, but then converge and join the condition. In general, image quality is better when first conclusion was seems to be very important. Is it better put the treatment or the so-called dome in the center or in the round? And we were looking at the solid line, now let's look at the dotted line yet. So, like previously, we see the proportion of the treatment object with respect to this normal object, but then we put it in the center and then round. And then we increase the area. So as you can see, the proportion still, of course, differs very strongly how the contrast is retained in such a new object. But we can see that the dotted line, the frequency drop more smaller annuli. And here we can see that the proportion is what governs the, the contrast retention the most, but split annuli into more and more bone, and when we have a different optic, then the image quality is worse and worse. So if image quality and contrast retention is our goal, it's better to have one zone. And finally, lastly, we go to the question in terms of ray angle version or ray whole cross somewhere near the optical axis, or maybe cross individually focused somewhere away from the optical axis, which is better. Well, we have this example here. So the top row will have an input and my gateway send all the ray directly towards the axis. You can see that the orange ray is the right ray. The orange rays are the distance optic, and they all point to the optical axis across the 0 diameters of the retina. But then we have the treatment annuli, which is also here with the green. They also focus on the optical axis, but in 2 diameters in front. So, example, the optic. And overall, the more fancy where we need the round in the core profile. And what we can do, you can see here, we are looking at the plane here at -4 diopter. And you can see the array from the central annulus where we have the round. Focus together first, focus each other first, so non-coaxially cross, and then we went divergent towards the optical. So interval is modulating really fast. And to is non-coaxial anti-focusing, I mean more traditional coaxial focusing where they actually meet at some point along the optical axis. Well, it's non-coaxial focusing can reduce the number of these jumps in the internet, extra modulations and phase inversions, giving smoother CF. And I believe that distraction is something that can advance concentration on the eye. The non-coaxial approach seems to have a nicer, smoother image quality, but less glossy. But on the whole, it is the proportion of the total versus the image like got that uh, multifocal, multi-channel design. So thank you very much. This is our school of optometry. I got this postcard from the where the illustration came from, and I get from Larry back in the day. So here it is. This is our team, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Matt. Are there any questions? Yes, Ray has a question.
Hi, Matt. It's good to see you. So my question is, this is the profile and how the lens operates independent of the eye, right? So when you put these lenses on the eye, they may not center exactly the way you want, and the pupil size is varying up and down. Have you done any modeling with the optics of the eye in place with these lenses?
Yes, of course. So another reason why this wavefront description of let's say optical properties of light, one of the reasons why it's so useful and elegant is that we are able to superimpose wavelengths from the eye, for example, if we one millimeter and a wavefront from the lens, we either design or sell, but also measure and VPO parameter, and superimpose them. We add them together, so we can investigate the contribution of eye and lens separately and together. And we can also restrict the pupil time and move it around to simulate traits and other phenomenal things. Uh, so we looked at that, and it served as publication from our CORL clinical optic research lab. You will find what we described the process.
Larry?
Another comment? Yeah. Hey, man, welcome to Africa and vicarious travel. You should have been here. Just a comment. I'm really pleased to see you show some of the image simulations. If you were watching our performance yesterday, I made a plea for our colleagues to spend a little more time actually examining that computed retinal image. Now, in your case, you're just looking at the image produced by the spectacle. And as Ray points out, it'd be nice to be able to combine the spectacle with the eye's wavefront error to get a better look at the retinal image and actually display it. Now, I know you have the techniques and the software and the talent to make these kinds of tools available to our colleagues. And I would recommend that we put a little more effort into reviving that wonderful software developed some time ago called IRIS, the Indiana Retinal Image Simulator, and see if we can't find a way to make that publicly available in a very convenient, easy way to use. And the second point being that your image quality assessment, you had a couple of different ways, the optical transfer function and the amplitude of the image. Might be worth putting in a couple of scalar metrics of the sort we've developed in the past. Things like visual stroke ratio, those kind of things, to boil it all down to a single number that's a little bit easier to deal with. So think about that right in your spare time. I think that would be a really useful service to our colleagues.
Thank you very much. Two comments there. First of all, the software that is I returned it's an old version, but it is available to download from the Google website. And it you can find it in Google. So it's not pretty pleasing to share it. That's an old version. There's a great software by Professor Damian Bettinel, which provided a very small software for simulating images on the retina, with a different website, which is called observing coefficient, and it's free. It's available online on Professor Damian Bettinel. And we, our lab, we're also working on making some problem. But the moment it's based on a main line, you can actually start this. It has a graphical interface. So the future, but in the new there will be two things. Professor Gqeberha and the there was one more thing that I forgot that was yeah, hopefully that's the more.
Are there any further questions?
Hi, Matt, Joss here. I was wondering what your simulations are for on-axis, and a lot of the myopia literature is concerning peripheral viewing. So I was just telling to a gentleman here yesterday that, you know, we don't really know how all these things work. And if you have an off-axis bundle of light coming in, all these images also happen to fall on the fovea. So what's your take on that?
As much as we love the way of the limitations of the wavefront model is that it implicitly is valid for a light that travels along the optical axis, and then there's a typical plane, and we know the wavefront, and then we go to the retina. So it is not trivial to aim a wavefront for oblique angle into the pupil. We do it in our lab. Sometimes move the barometer, the eye looks straight, and we move the barometer to get oblique angles like 20 degrees temporal, 20 degrees nasal. It's not ideal. One approach. Another approach is Professor David Atchison, who spoke before, just with the that very, very interesting paper, but with Herman on the simulation of reviewing. These are pretty complicated even for me, but very recommended read. You yourself know some of your these are biometry, so you have all these different models of the eyeball and you use inside the units online to investigate this eye viewing. It is very useful if someone could come analytical formula to translate that away from an axis wavefront from the people plane to valid for optical view. Extremely useful. I'm nowhere nearly as skilled in the math to complement this, but if you people who are willing to collaborate on that, would be very useful. And finally, is that all this viewing has two aspects. One is when the eye is looking in one direction, and we want to know what's happening in the periphery with light that is coming in obliquely. And another one is when the eye shifts away, looks to the side. In the second scenario, the wavefront model is perfectly valid because after all, when we rotate our eye, we rotate the axis with it. So we're good there. The difficulty is when we have one axis for our line of sight and another axis for that goes to the periphery of the retina where we want to investigate. This is a complicated scenario, so work in progress there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. For those that don't know, Matt is also on the organizing committee, and he is the person that's been working in the background of getting our website together, assisting us with a lot of the audio visual. And I'd like to say thank you very much to you, Matt, for helping us.
It's a big journey home. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, I think let's take a 20-minute break and have tea, coffee, and snacks. And then we will move on to Adam and Magdalena.
Yeah. Well, you don't. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah,